Question number one. Question number one talks about the Zellweger syndrome. Zellweger syndrome is due to defect in which organelle? Options are lysosome, peroxisome, mitochondria, and Golgi body. Here I'd like to tell you the question on Zellweger syndrome has been asked multiple times with lots of variation. Okay, so here what is the background information which you have to know? The background information is that we have this organelle called the peroxisome. Right, we have this organelle called the peroxisome. In the peroxisome, there is metabolism of two very important compounds. One is the branched fatty acid. In our diet, we have certain branched fatty acids which are getting metabolized in the peroxisome. The best example which is there in the diet would be the phytanic acid. Alright, so phytanic acid, which is a branched fatty acid present in our diet, is getting metabolized in the peroxisome. The second important molecule which is being metabolized in the peroxisome is the very long chain fatty acid. Now here you have to understand that this branched chain fatty acid is coming from the diet, whereas the VLCFA is the endogenous, which is synthesized by our body as part of the lipids. This is mostly endogenous that we are talking about. The VLCFA are present in large amounts in the CNS, but the dietary phytanic acid cannot cross the blood-brain barrier, so this would not be present inside the brain. Okay, the phytanic acid, if at all it accumulates, it will be accumulating in the rest of the body. Alright, so here when you talk about metabolism in the peroxisome for the fatty acids, we can have two sorts of problem. The metabolism of the phytanic acid is deficient. One enzyme in the peroxisome which is associated with metabolism of phytanic acid is not working. Here you are going to get a separate problem. But in some cases, what will happen? The peroxisome itself will be defective. So defect in peroxisome can manifest in two ways. All enzymes are absent. In other words, the peroxisome is empty. Alright. Alternately, the peroxisome itself is absent. Peroxisome itself is absent. In this case, you will have an entirely different disorder. Okay. The first one, where a single enzyme related to metabolism of phytanic acid is absent, we call it the Refsum's disease. The second condition, where the whole peroxisome is defective, either it is absent or it is empty, means there are no enzymes present inside it. This is known as Zellweger syndrome. As you can make out, in Refsum disease, there will be accumulation of the phytanic acid. Alright, and this accumulation will occur outside the CNS. In Zellweger syndrome, predominantly there will be accumulation of very long chain fatty acid in CNS. But please keep in mind, at the same time, you will also have the phytanic acid which is getting accumulated outside CNS. This will be the minor component. The phytanic acid outside the CNS will be minor component in case of Zellweger syndrome. More predominantly, it will be the very long chain fatty acid that is accumulating in the CNS. Because of this reason, you will only have the peripheral neuropathy features here. Because the CNS is not involved, so you'll only have peripheral neuropathy features. Whereas here, the CNS is getting involved, so you will have the central neurological features as well. Last thing that you have to keep in mind is the Zellweger syndrome is also known as cerebrohepatorenal syndrome. Depending on the organs which are getting affected, it is also known as the cerebrohepatorenal syndrome. So these are the information which you need to know when you talk about the peroxisomal metabolism and the associated disorders. Very frequently we have seen questions from both Refsum's and the Zellweger syndrome. Recently, we had 2 sessions of the INCT exam. In the morning session, they asked about Refsum. In the afternoon session, they asked about the Zellweger syndrome. So very frequently you are getting the questions on Zellweger and Refsum. This is the additional information you should know. What are the metabolism taking place in the peroxisome? What are the problems which can happen depending on the degree of the problem? How many enzymes are missing, like that, and the associated points. So in Zellweger syndrome, remember VLCFA in the CNS. The other name is cerebrohepatorenal syndrome. In Refsum disease, mainly it is the phytanic acid which is outside the CNS, and you'll only have the peripheral neuropathy features. You'll not have the central neurological features. Why? Because the dietary fatty acid will not cross the blood-brain barrier. With this information, let us quickly go back to the question. Zellweger syndrome is due to defect in the peroxisome. Your answer is the peroxisome.